Hello and welcome to the Classic Car Weekly podcast, the sibling podcast to the popular weekly title. I'm this week's host, staff writer Jesse Billington, and I'm joined by editor David Simister.
Good morning.
And our content editor James Peen.
Greetings.
How are we both? And importantly, as we always start off, how are the classics?
I'm good. The MX-5 is again keeping me occupied. It's got a slowly deflating offside front tyre, which means I think it's not a puncture. I think it's a rim that's gone porous, which had an issue with that on one of the rears last year. So I think I need to get that looked at and get the alloy sealed up again. So that's my next job to do on the MX-5.
Fun times. James, any developments from your garage?
Oh, there are developments, but not of a good nature. I'm supposed to be going on holiday on Monday with my T5 to go camping, and it's currently got a leaky radiator. And I spent a few minutes last night trying to get the old bumper off, but it's got a seized star adjuster that someone's rounded out. So I'm a little bit stupid at the moment, just trying to get the front end taken apart. So it's looking likely that I'll be tenting it and cramming everything into a Mini Countryman.
Going to be a lot of tight packing then, I think. How many people are heading off camping, or is it just you and some friends, or is it a full family affair?
No, it's the family. It's myself, it's my partner, it's my daughter, 2 dogs, massive tent, and all the accoutrements that go with. So it's going to be a little bit of a squeeze.
I was going to say, have you got a roof rack on that Countryman, or is this going to be things on laps and things under seats?
Oh no, we've got a roof rack, we've got a roof box, but say 2 fairly large dogs, and all the stuff that my partner insists on taking with us when we go camping is going to be difficult to say the least.
I'm familiar with how people often end up overpacking for camping holidays. Trust me, we've somehow went on a camping holiday a few years back as a family with a Toyota Hilux pickup truck that still necessitated an entire trailer behind it full of stuff as well. So yeah, familiar with the overpacking concept. And best I try and avoid that. I usually just go with a tent, and if I haven't got it in a rucksack, I just try and make do. Anyway, classic side for me though. Obviously, previous podcasts I've sort of been working on getting the MG working for my sister's wedding, which was weekend just gone, and it was not working. I had it turning over on the Tuesday night. I got it close to starting on the Thursday, but it just we got nowhere basically, and also we've got a water leak on the coolant return line running behind the sort of intake and exhaust manifolds. So a lot of pieces to come off. I think I might have to drop the sump, drop the oil pump off of it so I can adjust the distributor timing gear that runs off the camshaft, because annoyingly that gear turns both the distributor and the oil pump, and while you can sort of pick it up and turn it round, it's sort of faced, so it will only go in one direction against the oil pump, which helps me no end. So sump off, oil pump off, adjust the gear for the distributor, and then distributor on first. The oil pump can sit in whatever orientation it wants to once I've done all that. So hopefully that might solve the timing issue. The water pump, I'm just going to have to order a new olive and fittings for the return line, because that's, or I sort of just basically lob a load of JB Weld at it and hope that it seals it up enough. So yeah, that moves on. But the Jimny was pressed into service on that Saturday, and a far better choice. It was absolutely torrential rain, plus rear seats down meant I could just keep lobbing the amount of stuff that a wedding seems to generate across its day at the back of the car, and just sort of throw it in there like a van and walk back and collect it the next day. So we'll see how it goes. I've got a few weekends that are empty coming up that I might be able to finally get the MG working, but I've said that for nearly a year now. Anyway, we'll dive into the main parts of this week's issue, and we'll start with the lead news story, which is one that's actually quite close to home physically for me, which is Yob Behaviour threatens a local show. James, this was a story that you uncovered and wrote up.
Yeah, well, actually, it was uncovered by one of our freelancers who attended the show and then spoke to one of the organisers afterwards. So I believe, first-hand experience of what was happening, but essentially we've all been to a show where there's been some noisy visitors. And in this instance, it was a certain car, which we haven't mentioned, but they know who it was. And that led to a number of angry residents who then went through one of the residents to complain to the owner of the sports centre where the show takes place, which has been actually happening for the last 6 years on a monthly basis. So for it to cause a disturbance in the village, it's kicked off quite a kerfuffle, really. So hopefully it won't go any further.
And yeah, I was going to say, I know I'm sort of familiar with the town of Oakley. It's not too far north of me, and it is a hugely popular event. It's the amount of cars that it sort of drags out for sort of a nice sort of midweek evening meet is fantastic and sort of a great piece of the local classic community. But it's a shame that we're sort of seeing it disrupted and earn a bit of a bad rap from just one person. It shows just how easily one bad apple can spoil the cart.
Well, the 8th of July meeting attracted its record number of cars, actually, so 413 cars. But as you say, one or two bad apples could disrupt the cart.
Yeah. Is this possibly a growing trend as we see sort of a newer iteration of sort of classic owners and drivers arriving in the community that haven't sort of quite got the gist of the atmosphere yet? Or has this been something that's long term?
Well, there was an awful lot of comments about this on social media for the events page anyway. And I believe at one point they were talking about sort of banning the more modern element of classics, but there was a bit of a backlash to that. So they've kept it open for all cars. But you say it seems to be a growing trend with sort of the more modern classic scene.
And it's certainly not unprecedented either. I mean, the thing that struck me when I was reading this story was, up here in Lancashire, I used to go quite a lot to the classic car meets at the Scotch Piper, which is a pub up in this part of the world. And again, they had a very long running classic meet, which been running for many years. And again, that got pulled 2 years ago again because of the various problems with people driving illegally, doing burnouts, lots of noise, that sort of thing, and it can be a real shame because unfortunately, these when you get a complaint, obviously, if you get the local council involved, it can very quickly lead to something being mothballed.
Mm. We've only got to look at sort of the amount of hurdles and battles that places like the Ace Cafe have had to put up to sort of try and change the sort of atmosphere and the sort of approach that its clientele take to sort of arriving, displaying, and leaving the site. And I think that Caffeine and Machine have a very good sort of reputation for self-policing in that sense. The fact that they sort of have the cameras at the exits, they have, well, literally, there was a period of time that I do remember they used to name and shame publicly on their social media feeds if someone was caught leaving or driving in a sort of let's say, sort of uncouth manner, they would put the car details and registration plate on their social media platforms and say, "You're not welcome back here. Do not come back." And it sort of seemed to work because you sort of rarely heard those stories long after about the Caffeine and Machine location. Certainly when they started up at the Hill, it was sort of very harshly implemented.
If you think back as well, like the Ace Cafe, I mean, that used to be a little bit of a hooligan element. Entering and exiting. The whole point of the Ace Cafe was it was a sort of a fast place, wasn't it? The whole point of a cafe racer was
Mm.
why the Ace Cafe came into being. But I know I used to go to a show when I lived in Surrey at Wheels Day, and there was one particular exit there where everybody would gather just to watch. Let's face it, mostly modified Mark One and Mark Two Escorts booting it out of the exit. So it always attracts a certain element and a certain crowd, but in terms of behaviours to represent the classic car scene, it's not exactly ideal.
Yeah, and when you sort of think about how it's one of those things, if you only ever hear about things when they go wrong or when there's sort of bad behavior, you never hear reports back of sort of 500 classics turned up to a meet and everyone behaved impeccably. That doesn't really make a headline, unfortunately, despite the fact that it is the norm that happens pretty much sort of every day of the week, 52 weeks of the year. But it's just one of those things that unfortunately is a behavior that's creeping into shows, and it's not fitting. And I think it's good to see that the show's also taken a proactive approach to sort of metering it out and sort of hopefully reaching sort of a positive agreement with local residents, and the show will hopefully sort of see it carry on as well.
I mean, I know for a fact that my daily driver, my Abarth, is quite a noisy car, and it turns its heads when I do the school drop off. But there's a difference between having a noisy car and acting in a sort of hooligan way, isn't there?
Yeah, certainly. I know when we had all the cars out for the wedding, shunting the Mustang around. I know that it can be sort of quite raucous and it can make itself known if you absolutely clog it. But again, you've got to actively try and drive it in a manner that's sort of unfitting of the situation, let's say, to sort of cause that sort of a scene. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, you can have a sort of a car with a brazen exhaust note, but a lot of it still comes down to exactly how you drive it. I don't know if you've got any more to add on that one, David. If you've been sort of any other sort of shows or meets that have had that sort of thing. I know it's not common to have it. It's not common at the Classic Car Weekly meets over at Withall. We don't have people leaving it with giant flurries of wheel spin.
No, I think yeah. I mean that's the yeah, such things to the point you're very much making, that the vast majority of shows and meets, the vast majority of owners who are taking part, they tend to be very well behaved, and they know that they've got to be respectful of the neighbours of the venues, and that's a really really important thing. And it's also worth mentioning that. Yeah, the vast majority of these shows do a lot of hard work, usually from volunteers who are unpaid as well, who marshal these events in terms of patrolling them and being proactive. So that's a really important part of what these events do. But obviously, once you're out of the gate and you're off the venue, it's difficult to to monitor that once they're beyond the perimeter of the event. But ultimately, if you are doing something illegal, it could very well be something that the police enforce.
Mm. And that makes sort of shows not a little less appealing, but sort of certainly it's harder to organise a show if you've got to then sort of coordinate a police response to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
James, you mentioned in your sort of stories of sort of meets gone by, Ford Escorts with sporting provenance, and we've got another one of those actually on page 2 of this week's issue, and one that sets sort of a pretty much, I think it's a record, isn't it, for an Escort of this model at auction.
Well, this is the one
Yeah,
that David actually, yeah, you go for
yeah.
there. You found as well.
Yeah, so this is a Ford Escort. It's fairly well, sort of travelled in the news this week. But a Ford Escort RS 1800 that was sold at historic sale last weekend at Windsor Lake, and the estimate was pretty high. But again, in recognition of the kind of the car's provenance, that it was estimated to fetch somewhere between 165 and 180,000 pounds, which is a lot of money for a Mark II Escort. But this actually sold for more than 276,000 pounds once you add the buyer's premium and the VAT in, which is a huge result for a Ford Escort. And there was a real bidding battle for this. Three different bidders were involved, and they went to, I believe, an online bidder based here in the UK. But the fact that they were, competing to get this Escort, you pretty much feel like no matter what money was involved, just shows just how much appetite there is for. Fast Fords, particularly if they have the right provenance, and this one had everything going for it. It was been owned by the same family for more than 50 years. It had a very sympathetic restoration done. It was a former press fleet car, and it's an RS 1800, which is kind of the daddy of the Escort Mark II range. So the one that everybody wants. So I'm not surprised that actually it did go for as much as it did, because it is an absolutely huge result, and it just shows that where condition and provenance are tip top as they were with this example, people will still pay a lot of money for it.
And obviously, we sort of often talk about the blue oval tax and sort of cars coming through, but I think this is truly one of those outstanding moments where you sort of look back and go, it is an exceptional car. You can see why it's fetched the numbers that it did, and it's great to see that this is sort of approaching the older end of sort of the classic car sort of range. As we look at it now, we sort of look at the fact that we've got more 1980s, 90s, and very early noughties cars coming in. It still shows there is this huge sort of support and interest in what we'd sort of still frame as very much the archetypal classics of sort of years gone by, those 60s, 70s sort of Ford Escorts and so on and so forth. It's great to see that support there, and that these interesting cars with this heritage are still coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Fords in particular is because you got to remember that at the time that this car was made, Ford had I think it's somewhere between 25 and 30% of Britain's new car market. So, you in the 70s and 80s, people grew up with Fords. They were everywhere, and as a result, there are a lot of people now who are in a position to buy classic cars who are really nostalgic for Fords, particularly the hot ones. But equally, rust proofing then isn't what it is now, and a lot of those RS 1800s, RS turbos, Cosworths, and so on have gone. So there are a lot more people who are hankering for these cars as nostalgic buys than there are good survivors to sustain that market, and that's why you see fast Fords, particularly ones with good provenance, making really big money. We've seen it with more modern examples. There was, I think it was the NEC show last year. There was a Ford Escort Cosworth that went for £212,000, and not that long ago, again, there was that big story about the ex-Princess Diana Ford Escort RS Turbo fetching a record price, and we've seen similar again with cars, newer examples, things like Sierra Cosworths as well, RS 500s, where they've gone for really, really big sums. And yeah, it's very easy to get carried away with, wow, isn't that, astonishing? But you've got to think actually the market is there for them, because there are so many people who are really, really keen to get the best examples of hot Fords, and they will compete with each other at auctions to get these cars.
That's the beauty of an auction, though, isn't it? It's like only takes two people to bid up a car, two people who really want something, and it's a case of, if you want it, find another. And if they're not out there, you will pay for it.
Yeah, and we've seen this too at sort of much lower price levels. I mean, I remember a really big story we covered a couple of years ago was a Volvo 240, which again, that was only the estimate. It was only about 1,500 to 2 grand, but it was a really, really nice example. And it only took two people who really, really, really wanted that Volvo to push the price. I think it was about £12,000 it went for in the end. It was an absolutely astonishing result. It was sort of 4 or 5 times its auction estimate. But, where else are you going to find an absolutely mint, pretty much as new Volvo 240?
Well, you're going to cringe now, but my old neighbour, when I was a kid, when he passed away, he had an absolutely mint, I think, 40,000 mile 240. Nobody wanted it, and it went to the scrapyard.
Yeah, that's the thing, and so many of these cars do. I mean, you think about it, maybe not so much RS 1800s, but you think how many Ford Escort RS 2000s or I don't know, Vauxhall Calibra turbos, or sort of all these cars, and a lot of them at the time, they will have either been wrapped around hedges or rusted away or been scrapped or traded in, and these cars obviously, so a lot of these cars do disappear, which is why survivors, particularly the good ones, they go for the money that they do.
Mm. Well, it's certainly an interesting story, and sort of follows on from, I think it was a story we had in the week previous issue where we had those low mileage Jaguars coming through. 24,000 miles is incredibly low mileage for a Ford Escort as well. So it's great to see that these cars are still coming to market and still gaining the interest that we'd love for them to sort of get and sort of keep these interests going. We've got another story that we think is going to come through in this week's issue as well, of another car setting an incredible auction record. I don't know if we want to keep our paper dry on that one, or if we want to sort of touch on that now.
So, I was going to say, I think if we say it, then we're committed to it going in the paper. But this is the 2CV, isn't it, that we've been talking about, the ex for your eyes only car, the one that was one of three modified by Pinewood Studios, to all sorts of wonderful things, allegedly in the hands of Roger Moore. But again, that sold for very big money, and again, it's all about provenance, isn't it? This is where else are you going to find a modified 2CV with that James Bond history behind it? So I suspect that is why it's gone for the price it has, and we may well see other 2CVs with that kind of provenance going for that kind of money again.
I mean, I will say it wasn't driven by Roger Moore in the film, or it wasn't driven by James Bond in the film, for being complete anorak. It was driven by Melina Havelock in that escape sequence.
Of course, it was.
But yes, but yeah, it's interesting seeing sort of these otherwise sort of relatively commonplace cars still sort of holding firm in the sort of the public mind and sort of capturing hearts when it comes to auction. We'll jump into our lead story, which sort of pivots off of the 2CV nicely, certainly in the choice of Mike's selection for this one. This is another one of our big group picks where we sort of have a sort of tenuous theme that we're then tasked with choosing a car for and sort of arguing the toss as to sort of who's got the best idea. And this time it was celebrating 135 years of surfing in the UK. This is a bit of a rogue idea of mine that sometimes one of them sneaks through our issue planning meetings where I have an idea. And this was to celebrate 135 years of surfing in the UK. Which classic car could you buy on the market today that's best to sort of either in period or at present day to go surfing with? And I'm really impressed with the selection we've got come forward. There are some cars that I would have never thought to have picked. So, David, I'll let you start with. Did you make a selection for this one? I don't think you did. Did you?
Believe it or not, I was actually, when this was put together, I was actually on holiday, not surfing, but I was very much at the beach on on the Isle of Wight when this was being written. So no, I didn't actually have any involvement with this feature at all. But what I can say is the one that surprised me most actually, because yes, we talk about the Volkswagen T2, which is kind of when you think about surfing in Cornwall, and that's kind of the go-to car that most people will picture in their heads. But James Sadler, who actually has done surfing before, our managing editor, his choice of surfing machine is a Peugeot 306 Estate.
It was a bit of a left field feature, but I remember discussing it with him while we were sort of sat in the hire car bombing around Le Mans, and I was like, actually, that makes an incredible amount of sense because it's small, it's nimble, it's able to get down all the lanes to all the quiet beaches with the good surf, but it's just about big enough as an estate car to lob surfboards in the back of or pop them on the roof. So it was an inspired decision. Obviously, David, you didn't get to pick one. If we were to twist your arm right now, what would you plump for? A classic to take to the beach to go surfing, loaded down with boards on top.
It would have to be a Land Rover Series 3. I think that's that is the I think for me that's the obvious one, because that's the car that if you do take down to the beach, it's going to be able to get back up again if it gets a bit boggy.
That's a solid choice.
Or you'd have to wait for the AAs to come out and fix it for you, so you could have a bit of a surf whilst you were waiting.
We're not suggesting that Land Rovers break down, surely, James. Come on.
Not in my experience, certainly not.
I was going to say, at least if you're parked on a sandy beach, you can just sort of pile the sand onto the little spot where it's dripped oil, and that way no one will think that was you.
Yeah, having grown up around what's it, 2 Series 2As and a Land Rover 110 and 2 Range Rovers, I can assure you that none of them ever broke down ever in any way.
Oh, I have to say the complete opposite.
I may be lying.
I was going to say, allow me to go to the kitchen for a pinch of salt.
My daily driven 110 was the most unreliable, temperamental car I've ever had. So I still love them, but yeah, there we go.
It's just, I think the get you off the beach again argument was similar to the one that I posed with the Suzuki Jimny, certainly the third gen, as they're sort of becoming sort of quite interesting classics. Not, I say this as someone who owns one, but sort of from within the sort of field, the way that people are sort of buying them and looking after them and cherishing them, they're certainly sort of becoming treated like classics, even if the sort of current owners aren't aware of that's what they're doing. But certainly for a beach car, having experienced one on and around the beaches of Corfu recently, and the fact that you can just sort of drop the top, chuck everything in the back, and it just feels right. And also it doesn't go wrong, and when the beaches are a bit scrabbly, you can get on and off them with relative ease. So I was quite pleased to finally have another shouting point for the Suzuki Jimny, but I was quite tempted by Mike's choice of the Citroen Mahari. I've always had a soft spot for my old Citroens, and yeah, the Mahari is pretty much a beach buggy.
Yeah, I think the only one that's missing from this roundup, I would say, is the one that I see a lot of time. It's not sexy, but you do see them quite a lot when you go to the beaches. Is the Ford Transit.
Yeah,
that's
especially especially the odd country version they did, which did have a 4-wheel drive system on. I think it was like the 3rd or 4th gens.
Yeah, I do seem to have lots of memories of sort of going to various holidays, and the go-to car seems to be the Mark III Ford Transit.
No, I'd totally agree with that. I mean, I went for the Volkswagen Type 2, obviously, because that's what I'm into, and I've seen countless ones when I've been down to Cornwall for Run to the Sun and various other holidays. But I think that's more of the sort of, if you've got a bit of money, you've got a bit of time, you go away for the week, then yeah, you have something like that. But if you're a working person and you just want to escape to the surf for a weekend, something like a Transit, you can fly down from wherever to your favourite surf spot, chuck all your stuff in, maybe sleep in it, and then come back to work for Monday. A modern-ish Transit, I think that's the one.
It is a good argument.
It's not sexy, but for surf, it does get the job done really well.
Well, you don't look at your car when you're surfing, do you?
No.
Exactly. You can kick back and enjoy the beach, and then simply hop in something that will relatively reliably work and fits into the day-to-day life quite nicely. Obviously, no one picked the iconic Volkswagen beach buggy, but we do have one featured in our classic section, actually, which nicely sort of carries on the theme over the page with the brilliant tale of Jim Sitke, who's had his for quite some time now. Let's have a quick delve elsewhere in this week's issue. Obviously, we've already mentioned keepers. Our classics pages, none of our cars feature this week. Instead, we're saying goodbye to James Sadler's Volkswagen Polo, and we've got the latest update update on John Joe Valan's Porsche 944. This is sort of one that he seems to be stripping all of the sort of race preparation off of to get it back into a far more sort of a tonable road condition, which is an interesting project, actually. You rarely see cars going back to road spec.
Especially when you think how many 944s have been converted to track cars. So it is nice to see if you were to purchase something, what you'd actually need to do to make it usable again.
Sort of the undoing process. It's possibly going to be a useful how-to guide by the time Joe has finished that. And of course, the ever popular The Way We Were sees us head to Lawnsworth Arms in Leeds in 1965. Lovely car park scene out the front of a rather nice-looking pub offering Tetleys on tap. And obviously, next week's issue, if you want to give a quick tease of what's coming up, we've got an A to Z of Rover, celebrating 140 years of innovation in there, as well as a buying guide for the Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. Other than that, gentlemen, have you got anything else to add on the tail end of this week's issue?
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the things we will be mentioning is we'll have a report on Festival and Exceptional, which you're not only going to, Jesse, but you're one of the judges.
Yes, yeah, I've been approached to head along and espouse my knowledge about unexceptional cars across the Saturday. So it's going to be interesting. I've had a look over the sort of judging crib sheets and sort of what we're being tasked with doing. So there's, I don't want to reveal too much ahead of time, but it's going to be an interesting day, especially as I've never done it before. So I'll be going to this event not just as a rookie Festival of the Unexceptional attendee, but also as a rookie concourse judge. I've never done judging before of this kind, so going to have some interesting behind the scenes tales for next week's podcast. I know we've got James Sadlier heading along as well, providing proper show coverage, I believe.
Yeah, and I'm weighing up. I don't know whether I'm going to go or not. I'm keeping an eye on the weather at this stage, but I'm weighing up whether to go to the Alton Park Gold Cup this weekend.
Very nice, yes, because the displays inside that are always worth attending as much as the racing.
I think for me, if you've ever been to the Alton Park Gold Cup, it's the racing is great, but actually the stuff on the infield is belting as well. There's so many clubs on show and so many interesting cars, so it's well worth a look if you haven't been before.
Yeah, I've done it once before and always looking for an excuse to get up there, but it's a long old trek for me to head up that way. But yeah, certainly worth attending if you're up that area. James, have you got any plans for the weekend?
I shall be trying to fix the van and packing. Then I have a week of no cars whatsoever, and then hopefully I'll be back in time for the local steam rally. Although I haven't mentioned that to my partner yet.
Well, hopefully you can get off to that steam rally. I do like a good steam rally. There's something quite fun about those. Right, well, that's all we've got time for on this week's edition of the Classic Car Weekly podcast. As mentioned, we'll be back next week with a new issue of Classic Car Weekly and a new edition of the podcast. In the meantime, remember to subscribe to the paper, subscribe to the podcast, or just pick up the latest issue wherever you can and give it a read. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back in about a week.